Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies?
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Hi, this is Rod Carew, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
Aha, welcome to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani with the ever-present David Cohen. And that was a little bit from Hall of Famer Rod Carew. We are revisiting baseball through and through here on Everything Old is New Again, even though they're not playing the game. It's still time to celebrate. It's still the summertime. And that means a continuation of our discussion of Yogi Berra with Jon Pessah, author of Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, a tremendous book. And go ahead, David.
Yeah, was there anyone on the team that Yogi not necessarily didn't get along with? Because I'm sure he got along with everybody, but was there a player that you know of that might have rubbed him the wrong way, or he might not have respected as much?
You know, I'm sure there was, but Yogi didn't talk about it. You know, if Yogi didn't like someone, you know, it was not in the press. You never heard it from Yogi. One of the interesting things about Yogi is that on the field, Yogi is this talkative guy. He's talking to the players when they came up to bat. He's talking to the umpires all game long. He'll talk to the fans when he's on the on-deck circle. He's a take-charge guy during the game. I mean, no question about that. Off the field, he's quiet, almost to the point of being shy. So there's two completely different people on the field and off the field. So off the field, you know, if there was some player that Yogi didn't like or didn't care for, you didn't hear it from Yogi.
And I'm just thinking that the name that came to mind to me was Billy Martin, and
he liked Billy and him.
I was going to say it could have gone either way, right?
Yeah, they were good friends. You know, he again, you know, tried to get him to stop drinking, but that was something that plagued Martin to the day he died, unfortunately, in a driving and drinking accident on Christmas Day. But he loved Billy.
Yeah, Billy gets a lot of rave reviews from people behind the scenes, not, you know, a totally different persona than what you see or saw in the newspapers back in the day. We had Rod Carew on the show a little ways back, and he spoke about how Billy Martin changed his batting style, gave him motivation, taught him how to steal home plate, and did so many things that really helped Rod Carew become the player he was. So, you know, it's interesting to see behind the scenes from Yogi, from this book that you've got here, which is, you know, an amazing look at the life of Yogi Berra. Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, with Jon Pessah. And you do get a feel for all of these other players in this book. How many of these players did you speak to, you know, and parties, people did you speak to get what you've got in this book? So many stories, because many of these people have passed.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was supposed to finish the book in 2.5 years. I finished it in 4.5 years, and there were people I talked to. Probably 150 or more people. There were some people that I told at the beginning that I knew I wanted to keep talking to, going, okay, this is going to take years. So if you're up for it, I'm just going to keep calling you. So, you know, one of those people were Ron Guidry, who told me a ton of stories about him. Another guy was Al Downing, who was terrific. I spent a lot of time with Bobby Brown, his first roommate. I spent a couple of days with Eddie Robinson, who was a great hitting first baseman the Yankees traded for and played in the mid 50s together. Really nice guy. Ends up being a baseball lifer. He was the general manager of the Texas Rangers for a while, a scout. Ralph Terry, who, you know, for people of my era, Ralph Terry was a dirty word. and turns out to be one of the nicest men I've ever met in sports. We spent a day together, again, before another old-timers game. He just told me a ton of stories about him. Bobby Richardson, Joe Pepitone. This was great for me because I was a Yankee fan. These are all the guys that I grew up watching and playing. Hector Lopez. There was no shortage of people. I mean, on the Mets, Ed Kranepool and John Matlack and Jerry Koosman, just filled with admiration for the guy and just great stories about Yogi. So there were no shortage. Yeah, there was a little shortage of people that played against him because, Yogi passed in 2015. He was 90 years old. And so there weren't a lot of players around, but I got to most of them. And they were terrific, absolutely terrific.
Now, in 1947, Bucky Harris's manager at the time was defending him to reporters, and his quote was, as close as I can get to it, is, "He will be the most popular Yankee since Babe Ruth." And this is 47. Ruth was not that far removed from the team, but certainly was, of course, the most popular Yankee of all time to that point. What did that statement come true? Do you think that Yogi became the most popular Yankee of all time in his day?
I think the phrase he said, this guy is going to become the most beloved Yankee ever. And I think that did come true. And you see it at old-timers games when he's introduced and the ovations that he got. You saw it when he came back to the Yankees in 1999. And of course, you can't make it up. A perfect game on Yogi Berra Day in 1999. David Cohn throws 88 pitches. And Don Larson's there as well. Yogi he was the guy that was in most demand for speaking engagements the whole time that he was with the Yankees. And one of the interesting things about that is that Yogi would not give speeches. So when you invited Yogi to come speak, you had to set it up as a Q&A. That's the way he did everything. But right all the way through his career, and one of the more interesting things is he was that way with the players. When he would come into the locker room, all the players flocked to him. During the old-timers games where Mantle and DiMaggio would be there, the biggest crowd of players, which eventually would include Mantle and DiMaggio, was around Yogi. He was an everyman. I mean, people just liked the guy. The guy didn't have a mean bone in his body. Fierce competitor, no question. And he's not a saint. He had his flaws like all the rest of us. But people I was talking to someone just yesterday who played with him, and he agreed with what I'm about to say, is when Yogi walked into a room, he just made everyone feel better.
Right. Put a smile on your face.
It was just the way he was. And I hear people, hard-bitten baseball writers that I know, baseball writers are lifers, and they're different. I hired in my two jobs, one at the Current, one with Newsday, a lot of writers, and baseball writers are a different breed. You're there for the whole season that starts in February and ends now in November, and all of them just looked at Yogi as like their uncle or their grandfather. And if you could, one of the greatest things was if you were around Yogi and you got a Yogiism. That was like the accomplishment of your career, to get a Yogiism. And so, yeah, I think it absolutely came to pass that he became the most beloved of Yankees.
And he used that persona pretty interestingly, and I wasn't there in the 50s, but I read through this book, which is tremendous. Yogi, we're talking with, by the way, Jon Pessah, Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. You get a feel for how he would disarm, so to speak, the batters when they would come up to the plate, and he would have a conversation with them or talk to them about things and kind of distract them. I'm sure he didn't invent that, but to get that from someone that's so likable, how do you not pay attention to him when you're at bat, but you need to bat? It had to be an advantage to pitchers to pitch to Yogi for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean Larry Doby, who's first black player in the American League. Ends up becoming great friends with Yogi. They end up living in the same town. At one point, turns to the umpire and says, "Can you get him to stop talking?" And, and he's talking to Hank Aaron during a World Series, and Aaron had we're taught to keep the label, so it can't hit the ball on the label and break the bat. And Yogi keeps telling him, goes, Hank, you the way you're holding the label is wrong. You're gonna, you need to hold it so that you can see it. He goes, Yogi, I'm not up here to read. And he's just they people would laugh. They didn't get mad at him, but it was a distraction, no question about it.
Yeah, if you go back to YouTube and you could see the 1950 World Series against the Dodgers and all, they have some videos, and he's omnipresent. He's like a rock behind that plate. He really personified that position, that's for sure. And we're going to have to take a break here. We'll be back right after this. Everything Old is New again with Jon Pessah. Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. A great book, tremendous read. You got to get this book, Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, with Jon Pessah, right here on Everything Old's New Again.
I'm talking baseball, Yogi, Moose, and Jerry, Yankee baseball, Pepitone.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We're talking Yogi Berra with Jon Pessah, who's written this great book, Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, a man who had a lot of knowledge while playing the game, and then turned that knowledge into a baseball manager, which I think, unfortunately, he was underrated because what happened in '64, and didn't get another job until '72 with the Mets, then took the Mets in '73 to the World Series, and the Mets got rooked in that World Series by this play. This is behind the scenes of Berra on the field in '73 at the World Series after a bad play. Just want to play that. I know it's hard to hear, but because the crowd's going nuts. Bud Harrelson is thrown out at home plate. Clearly, you could see on the replays that he was not tagged at all by the catcher, and it was an important play, an important role, an important series. There's Yogi's a different kind of personality. In other words, his persona was, I'm fun, you want to joke around about me, you have these Yogiisms and pretend and think that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine. But I think that he brought that Mets team to that World Series almost, not on his own, but with his personality to help these really overachieving ball players on that team to get to where they were. What did he feel about himself as a manager? Did he feel he was shortchanged because he had that opportunity with the Mets for 4 or 5 years? Then he had the Yankees again for a year and a half, and then was unceremoniously fired. And I don't know if he got the respect that he should have gotten as a manager. Am I wrong?
I think you're completely right. I mean, first of all, he's the first manager to take a team to the World Series in the American League and then in the National League. One of the reasons that he didn't get another job, he had offers from the Braves, from the Orioles, from the Red Sox. He wanted to, he loved where he lived in New Jersey. He didn't want to take his kids out of their schools. He wanted to manage in New York, or he wasn't going to manage. And by the way, his wife never wanted him to manage. She wanted him to be a coach. And because she knew Yogi loved being in uniform. And one of the reasons was she just didn't want him to go through the verbal abuse again. And every time Yogi managed, we started seeing stories in the paper about Yogi's not the brightest man in the world. Why are they hiring him to be a manager? But Yogi had a view of a season as a marathon and not a sprint, which really put him in opposition with George Steinbrenner. But we'll put that one to the side for the moment. He was a player's manager when he came up, and this is the way he looked at baseball. When he came up with the Yankees, either you were able to play the game or they got rid of you. You were expected to be good at what you did, and you put on the field. And Yogi's way of managing was, hey, you know what? It's my job to pick the lineup, and it's their job to play the game. He would be the kind of guy who, if you had a tough game, would pat you on the back going, no one's a 300 hitter every day, we'll get him tomorrow. You looked at it as a long season. The teams, both of his pennant-winning teams struggled, during the season, but at the end, they put it together and they get to the World Series. And in both World Series, he's ahead of the Oakland A's that are in the middle of a 3 championship run. So that's a great team they're up 3-2, and he asked Tom Seaver, "Can you go on 3 days rest?" Controversial decision. Seaver says yes. He gives up 3 runs, which is not a bad pitching performance at all. Mets only get 1 run. Matlack goes on 3 days rest the next game. In Game 7, he gives up 2 2-run homers. They lose 4-1. That close both times. The guy is had a winning record with the Mets. He's winning record with the Yankees. His overall record as a manager is winning. He wins 2 pennants. A lot of guys never get to the World Series, much less the 7th game.
Right.
So, yes, I agree with you. I think he's completely underrated.
Seems like a player's manager, though, and I'm interested in that story about the World Series in '73 strategy-wise, because George Stone was, I believe, supposed to pitch instead of Seaver that game in the 6th game. Seaver would have pitched the 7th game on regular rotation without being short-rested, and that decision that he made to take George Stone out of play for those both 2 games and play pitchers that did not have the usual rest was controversial. As a catcher, what did he feel about it? And it's sort of, he lived to see all of this business of the pitchers not pitching long, not having, everyone having to be relieved now at this time. And I'm wondering, to juxtapose that to his position of the starting pitcher in this game is going to, Seaver, Matlack, whoever, is going to go at least 8 innings, even in the World Series, no matter what. I mean, what did he feel, if you know, as a well-respected catcher, manager, and so forth, about how the game is played today, I guess is a better question.
It's hard to envision what it was like being a pitcher then and what is a pitcher now. I mean, if you go 5 innings now, it's a good outing. If you go 6 innings now, it's a great outing. The first time I talked to Ralph Terry, I looked up his stats, and he had pitched 298 innings one year, and the next year 299 innings. I mean, if you pitch 200 innings now as a starting pitcher, you're great. And I thought he was going to feel like he was abused as a pitcher. And so I mentioned it to him, and he was upset that Casey Stengel held him out in the last game of in the season where he pitched 299 innings because it meant that Whitey Ford pitched the most innings, and that's something that he wanted, not just for the pride of it, but because that helped him in negotiations for a contract. Yogi was the kind of guy in that particular series. Tom Seaver's the best pitcher in baseball, and you got the best pitcher. This is how he thought. I got the best pitcher in baseball. I'm going to go to him and say, "Can you go?" And if he says yes, then I put him out there. If he says no, then I'm going with someone else. And he asked Matlack the same thing. I mean, Matlack had a great season. George Stone had a great season. I think he was 12-4 that year. But George Stone is not Tom Seaver, and Tom Seaver is an incredible competitor, and he pitched a great game against a great team. I mean, I think 4 of those guys are in the batting order are in the Hall of Fame. And he's, it was controversial. And he always said, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do the exact same thing. Because that's the way, he had the best pitcher in the game. I'm going with.
Although, as you say, if Seaver had less, I hate to say it like this because I don't know any of this, but less ego and said, all right, listen, I'll win it in Game 7 on regular rest. I mean, that's not within Tom Seaver's personality. He never would have said, I'm not going to pitch, I can't pitch tomorrow. Seaver always was up for it, always was up for the challenge, and so we could talk about this decision forever. It's something that lasts because I was a young kid at the time, and it really affected me.
No question, it's a sore point with Met fans. But say the Mets score 4 runs and they win.
But that team never scored 4 runs.
This is true.
Okay, we're not talking about the Yankees.
It was a light-hitting team, no question about it.
And Starr had a bad shoulder and couldn't hit properly, and that was their only power, besides John Milner, who hit something like 19 homers for the year.
Right. And again, remember that he took that team to the World Series. He beats the Big Red Machine, which is a Hall of Fame team in the playoffs to get to the World Series. The team finished 3 games over 500. the worst winning record ever to get to the World Series. Yeah, they overachieved, and when a team overachieves, you got to give a lot of credit to the manager.
And that's what I do. I really do. Just that one decision sticks in my claw. But besides that, I loved him as a manager for sure. That's true. Just you mentioned Casey Stengel, and it came to mind that Stengel, especially the early days of the Mets, was this raconteur and had this odd way of talking and so forth. I wonder, because Yogi saw that. Yogi also was with that in the 50s as Stengel being his manager. How did he get along with Stengel, and did he take some hints maybe from Stengel the way he talked to the press?
Stengel was a really interesting guy. The players, most of the players hated the guy. I mean, he never talked to the players. The only player that he talked to was Yogi. He talked to the players through the press. He would call them my writers, and he used the press to get send messages. He rarely, if ever, talked to anybody. The only player that he had a good relationship on the team with was Yogi, which again tells you a lot about who Yogi was. I mean, and it was Yogi who was the guy who had the meetings with the pitchers to plan the game plan. So again, speaking to Yogi as a smart baseball player, it wasn't Casey Stengel. Casey Stengel didn't meet with the pitchers. Casey Stengel didn't talk to the players. That wasn't his style of managing, which was very different from Yogi's style of managing. But he loved playing for Stengel, and I think one of the big reasons was Stengel was the first first guy in the position of authority who didn't call him the ape or refer to him as dumb. He called him Mr. Berra. He called him my assistant manager. Which was true. He was his assistant manager. He was sort of like a bench coach, but he played behind the plate. They got along, and the irony about Yogi as a manager is that Yogi gets the managing job in large part because of his popularity, and the Yankees, though they were winning pennants, were only beating the Mets at the box office by about 100,000 fans a year. And the reason was that Casey Stengel was a draw. And,
right.
The guy that they had fired when they suddenly imposed an age limit, and it was 65, and when they fired him, he was 70 years old, and they tried to pawn it off as, well, he's 70 years old, so mandatory retirement age. And the great quote from Casey was, well, I'll never be 70 again. And that's how Yogi ends up becoming manager, because Casey Stengel is managing the Mets, and the Mets are as popular as the pennant and World Series winning Yankees.
And we're going to have to take a break, but we'll be back right after this and Everything Old is New again, talking about Yogi Berra, the book, Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, the author, Jon Pessah. Everything Old is New again. We'll be back right after this.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New again. We're talking Yogi Berra with Jon Pessah, author of Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. And I know David has a question here with respect to him being fired in 87 and the result of that. David? No. Did you have something other?
Yeah, no. I think it was 85 when Steinbrenner fired him. I remember it was like towards the beginning of the season, after saying that, he was the manager for, I forget how many years he promised him. And then, Yogi just said he would never set foot in Yankee Stadium again as long as George Steinbrenner was there. And that lasted a really long time.
Right.
That must have been really difficult for Yogi just to come to terms with. And
it was, everyone tried to talk him out of taking that position. Steinbrenner at the time was firing, at least one, sometimes two managers a year. The 80s was George at his absolute worst. And I was a sports editor during that time covering the Yankees, and I actually had trouble hiring Yankee writers because nobody wanted to cover the insane, you didn't cover baseball, you covered the soap opera, and baseball was hardly even secondary. It was like third or fourth thing that you did. But he brings him on. The first year is 1984. And that's the year that the Tigers go out, and win 35 out of the first 40 games and win the pennant by June. The Yankees and George kept threatening to fire Yogi that season, and he doesn't. And Yogi ends up taking a young team that lost Goose Gossage, and they turned Jay Vergetti into a relief pitcher, and they have the best record in the second half, so he has to bring him back, and he promised that him the full season, that for the end of your 2-year contract, and he fires him after 16 games, and he doesn't do it in person. He sends general manager Clyde King to Chicago to fire him. And at first, Yogi, talking to the writers, said, managers get fired. That's what he wants to do. It's his team. But you'll see me around here because they had traded for his son in the off season. I'll be around because I want to see Dale play. He goes home, talks to his wife, realizes fully what's happened, and has a conversation with his wife. And I'm sure it's something like, you'd be a fool if you go back to Yankee Stadium. And one of his best friends, John McMullen, who had owned a piece of the Yankees with Steinbrenner, sold that to be the manager of the owner of the Astros, told him the same thing. 14 years separation. And he was with the Astros before that year, so he's still in baseball. And then, from 1990 until 99, when they reconcile, he's not in baseball at all. And he told Ron Guidry told me a story that Yogi would tell him that those were the absolute, answering your question, those were the absolute worst years of my life, that he wasn't in baseball. Remember, this is a guy who's in uniform until he's 64 years old. That was his life. And when he looked in the mirror, he saw pinstripes. And to be separated from the Yankees, and he didn't even go to, they retired, Don Mattingly and him were very close. They retired Mattingly's uniform. He asked Yogi to come. He wouldn't come. Joe Torre and him are very close. Torre asked him to come and present to him a World Series ring. He says no. The Yankees honor Phil Rizzuto, his best friend, for 50 years service with the Yankees as a player and a broadcaster. And Yogi says, I'm not coming. And Rizzuto tells the press about it and says, you know what? I respect him for not coming. He's a man of principle, and he's not going to come. He's going to be good to his word. And finally, Steinbrenner comes to the Yogi Berra Museum and meets with him and looks him, puts his hands on his shoulders, looks him in the eye and says, worst mistake in baseball I ever made was firing you the way I fired you. I'm so sorry I did that. And Yogi looked at him and said, I made some mistakes too. And that was it. And they become good friends for the rest of each other's lives.
It's amazing how long it took Steinbrenner to apologize.
It really was. And I think, George had it was a big part of my first book. And George had a fear of dying of Alzheimer's. And that's eventually what ended up happening. And I think he got to the point of his life where he started looking and saying, what mistakes do I need to correct? What do I need to do? And Susan Waldman, who was from working with WFAN at the time, had a great relationship with him and said, it's time. I'll broker a deal, but if you want to fix this, you need to go and apologize to Yogi on Yogi's territory. And she actually had a easier time convincing him than the director and the founder of the museum had talking Yogi into doing it. When they presented to Yogi, he just explodes, which is so out of character, and says, I'm not doing this. It's another trick. I don't trust that guy. And he ends up going up to the office where they have a business selling Yogi memorabilia, and his two sons work the business. And they talked to him and said, look, your grandkids have never seen you in the place where you became so famous. Do this for the grandkids. Now, I've got a 22-month-old grandson, my first and only so far, and I got to tell you that one would have kneecapped me. And I think that was the winning argument to get Yogi to finally drop his objections. And again, once Steinbrenner apologized, they became good friends, called each other on their birthdays. Yogi did all these things for the Yankees, came and sat in Steinbrenner's box 2 or 3 times every homestand. I mean, he was, held the grudge, but when it was done, as he said, it's over. When it was over, it's over.
Yeah, a lot of wasted years, but good that they reconciled and salvaged something out of it.
Yes, and they had a good run together, before Steinbrenner passed.
Talking with Jon Pessah here. Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. Read a little something here from a writer from ESPN. Says Yogi Berra is the greatest winner of all time and one of baseball's most lovable, fascinating, and iconic players. Jon Pessah brings Yogi to life. From his childhood to his brilliance as a Yankee to his importance as a cultural icon. I thought I understood Yogi's life and career, but I learned something new on virtually every page, and I would agree with that. I never even knew that he was friends with childhood friends with Joe Garagiola from the beginning, and you'll turn these pages, you will read all about Yogi, but you'll read about the societies that he lived in, all the different ages, his 40s, his 50s, his 60s, and up until his death. You'll read about all these individuals that he crossed paths with, and it is just an amazing read. Before we go, I just want to ask, besides baseball, Yogi was known throughout the world, and at least throughout America. Did he run into, DiMaggio and Mantle and a lot of these players ran into the crossover of Hollywood society and try to mix with Hollywood a little bit. And did he take himself out socially of the baseball circle, or did he surround himself by? Seems like almost everybody in baseball knew him.
He was absolutely most comfortable in baseball, but Yogi was a guy who was very comfortable in his skin. And he just, he fit in wherever he went. He got very comfortable in front of the camera. He did 2 cameos, one with Marilyn Monroe in the 7-Year Itch, and one with Mantle and Maris with Doris Day, Cary Grant, That Touch of Mink in 1961 that ran in 1962. And he was so comfortable that the director praised Yogi for the things that he added to the character in the act that he had in that cameo. He also played a character he played, believe it or not, in 1962 on General Hospital. He played a brain surgeon. And he wasn't supposed to have lines, and they gave him lines, and he did them perfectly. And when they asked the director why they gave him lines, he said, "Well, he has good hands." And he was just a guy that's just absolutely comfortable in his own skin.
And, I was watching a rerun the other night of the old Dick Van Dyke Show with Mary Tyler Moore, and there he appeared there as kind of a walkthrough, had like one line with Mickey Mantle and a couple other players, and it was just so interesting to see and to go back, time travel, if you will, and put ourselves back into the 60s and 50s. Of course, there's more to Yogi than that, but during that time frame, to hear and see what it was like to have Yogi as a player and how popular he was in popular culture, and that's what our show's sometimes about too. He was all over. He wasn't just on the baseball field. When the season was over, he was on as we've played a couple clips already and talked about, as you did, in the movies. And he was everywhere in some form or another, even back when he was a player. And once again, unfortunately, we're going to have to take a break, but we have more coming up right after this with Jon Pessah, author of Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, right here, right now, and everything old is new again.
I'm talking baseball, Yogi, Moose, and Jerry, Yankee baseball, Pepitone and Terry, Ellie Kubek, Munson never quit, and the porch and right was Rogers Ballywick.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
This is Skip Lockwood. I'm a Major League pitcher for 12 and a half years. I am author of a new book called Inside Pitch, my life as a major league closer. I'm happy to be on a program. Everything old is new again, and I guess that applies to me as
Hi, everybody. This is Ron Swoboda of the 1969 Miracle Mets, author of Here's the Catch, a memoir of the Miracle Mets and more, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
This is Jim Leyritz, former two-time World Series champion New York Yankee, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Hi, this is Art Shamsky from the 1969 Mets, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again.
And we're back here on Everything Old is New Again, showing off a little bit there to Jon Pessah, author of Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. There was just a couple of the players that we've had on the show in the past, and we're just loving talking all things baseball, especially during this time where there is no baseball, which is a shame. But if you read this book or pick this book up, Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask, it's 550 pages, action-packed, stories, thrills, adventure. It's got it all behind the scenes of Yogi Berra's life and what he meant. And I'm telling you, he really writes this book in a way that's so much fun. Now, Yogi had so much popularity, was so famous.
He was probably one of the most visible men in America in the 50s and the 60s. He was, his career tracks the rise of television. So he is constantly doing commercials. He's doing cameos in movies. He's on game shows, which were big in the beginning of television. He is on all the variety shows, waving to the crowd, the Perry Como show, the Ed Sullivan show, the Jackie Gleason show, the Phil Silvers show, the Milton Berle show. He is virtually everywhere. And one of the my favorite stories in the book. There's a guy named George Lois who was a legend. One of the guys they based Mad Men on. And he's an advertising genius. And Quaker Oats, which owns Puss in Boots cat food, comes to him and they want him to sell cat food. And they say, well, just the only thing we're going to tell you is that women buy cat food. So the guy comes up with this brilliant idea of a cat working out in a gym and then coming to talk to Yogi Berra. And it was a voiceover. And they show, and Yogi does it great. And the voiceover in the first take is a very young actor named Alan Alda, and they show it to the people at Quaker Oats, and they go like, "What are you doing? We told you women buy cat food. This is a baseball player." And Lois says, "Trust me, your wives know who Yogi Berra is. Women in America know who Yogi Berra is. So they're not trusting it." So he does a focus group, a series of focus groups, 200 women. Out of 200 women, 180 of them identify Yogi as well-known and, more important, well-respected and trusted, which is advertising gold. And so Yogi has, the voiceover ends up being Whitey Ford. And he's talking to, it does the, for then that was kind of the cutting edge of a talking cat. And, women know who Yogi is, men know who Yogi is. He's one of the most trusted people, advertising gold. This guy is just as well known, as popular as anybody in America not only just during his career, but after his career. He does a commercial with the Aflac Duck, and he's the only guy to upstage the Aflac Duck. And I talked to the guys who ran that commercial, and they said that it was the most popular Aflac commercial that they've ever done. Yao is in a commercial with Yao Ming. He does Miller Lite. They came to him after 2001, after the World Trade Center, and asked him to do a public relations commercial, and he directs the New York Philharmonic, and it's a great scene. Look it up on YouTube, and he's just waving, and he does the whole, and he comes down and he finishes and he turns to the camera and he says, "Who is this guy Philharmonic anyway?" That's Yogi. The one I was hoping to get in, but I didn't. It amazed me. So they put him up for the Medal of Freedom. And, they get the 100,000 signatures that they need, and it goes to Obama. And Obama looks at the list, And I know a couple of people in the Obama administration. They told me the story. He looks at the list and he's just kind of scrolling down, and there's Barbra Streisand, there's Steven Spielberg, huge figures, and he gets to Yogi and he stops and he goes, Yogi's on this list, and the A's are like, yeah, what's the problem? He goes, I can't believe he hasn't gotten this medal already. And that's so it goes from presidents down to fans, okay? And he was just, again, he had some tough times. We didn't get into Dale's drug problems,
right?
But I spent a fair amount of time in the book, and being a celebrity father is hard. We've seen stories about that. About Carrie Fisher. Did a great job with that, and it was hard. I mean, his middle son Tim ends up playing football, not baseball, because he doesn't want to be compared to his father. And it was tough. And when Dale came up, the Pirates called him Yogi, and they and the song that they played when he came to bat was "Here Comes the Sun." It's got to be tough having Yogi Berra, who everyone loves, as your father, and everyone feels like he's theirs, and you're literally sharing your dad with the country. Last thing I'll tell you is, one of the things, he was worldwide. I mean, the Pope knew him. When he went to visit the Pope in Vatican City, he's hugely popular in Japan. When the Yankees went there several times, they go there with Mantle, and it's Yogi Berra who gets the most cheers. When in 2005 he accompanies the Derek Jeter Yankees to Japan on their tour of Japan, and who gets the biggest ovation? It's not any of those players, Paul O'Neill or Mariano Rivera or Derek Jeter. It's Yogi Berra. So his fame was just, I thought I knew a lot about Yogi. He was my father's favorite player. I'm a huge fan. I'm a Yankee fan since the time I was 4 years old. I was a sports editor covering the Yankees, covering Yogi's time with the Yankees. I covered some games with him. I thought I knew a lot about him. I started digging in, and it was like I cut 60 pages out of this book before I threw it in. And it was just so, it's such a rich story. It's pretty much the American dream.
Yeah, he's a rock. He was fun. He's one of a kind. You always hear that. You hear they'll never come again. But I challenge you to find someone in baseball today that has the gravitas or the potential that Yogi has to be as beloved as he was and as he is, represented in Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask by Jon Pessah. I'm going to read a little something from Joe Garagiola Jr., the son of one of the best friends of Yogi. Jon Pessah's meticulously sourced Yogi immediately becomes essential for anyone interested in the life of a true American icon. The book is a serious and thoughtful treatment of a life that was a good deal more complex than most people realize. Throughout, it's Yogi's warmth, love of his family, and loyalty to them and his friends that drive this narrative. Yogi Berra was a beautiful person with a big heart, and this biography more than does him justice. Simply put, a great read for any baseball fan. I don't know what better can be said about this book, so I won't try to, but Jon Pessah, and also you can go to jonpessah.com, JONPESSAH.com, or Amazon. Yogi, A Life Behind the Mask. John, tremendous book, really well done. It's written beautifully. It's not just one of these, and the next game I hit a home run and it was off a 1-0 pitch or something like that. It's really behind the scenes. It really gets into the mind and the life of Yogi. I really enjoyed it, and you got to get this book if you're listening and a baseball fan, especially during this time when there's no baseball. This will replace satisfy, let's say, your need for baseball in today's world. John, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Doug and David, I really appreciate it. This has been fun. I could talk about Yogi for hours, as you can see.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, John. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week to continue more of the fun with America's pop culture entertainment talk show. Everything Old is New Again. We'll be back next week. Join us. David Cohen, I am just exhausted looking at this Amazon list from Angelica, Leo, and my wife. It's enough. I want to find something brand new that I can buy for them that they're not looking at elsewhere online. What do you think?
How many times are you going to send Amazon gift cards? They're so impersonal. I just wish there was something out there where we could send a gift that's unique and that hasn't been seen before.
Karen Allen's here with us to talk about KarenAllen-FiberArts.com. Karen?
Hi. Yes, I'd love to tell you about, I have a store that I opened 15 years ago. The website is KarenAllen-FiberArts.com. It has very, very unique things that you won't see anywhere else. I have a love of really small studio designers all over the world that are doing unusual things. And it carries my own line that I make personally by hand up in my studio, and it's called Karen Allen Cashmere, and it's all there on my website.
That's KarenAllen-FiberArts.com, KarenAllen-FiberArts.com. You've been listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's pop culture entertainment talk show. Find us on the web at everythingoldisnewagain.biz. That's .biz.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat station.